Welcome to Barrett and Baxa. Everyone else has a podcast. Why not us? Come along and join the chosen few.
Hey everybody, Steve Barrett here again, Barrett and Baxa, and once again, as maybe you like it or maybe you don't, I don't have Bob Baxa here yapping in my ear the whole time, but instead on the other side of your screen, you are looking at Jim Lewis. Hi Jim, how are you?
I'm good today, Steve. How are you?
Jim, I wanted to interview you on this podcast. We have worked together on things, but I want to start out by just reading, and I'm just going to read the mini bio, if you don't mind, from your IMDb page, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Jim Lewis is an American television and film producer responsible for shows such as The Great American Car War, Skating's Next Star, and more. He's also produced numerous space documentaries and documentary series, including One Giant Leap, America's Animal Astronaut Heroes, Untold Stories from the Rocket Ranch, and others. He served as a line producer for the Space Brothers feature film, and he was part of the team that won a regional Emmy for live mission coverage of STS-95, which was John Glenn's space shuttle launch. I'll just stop there because it goes on and on with you, Jim. But tell me, first of all, how'd you get your start in the media business?
I was lucky, I think, is the big thing. I mean, I studied radio television at a local community college. That came under the School of Journalism, which is why I contacted you actually initially about my thing about people's rants on headlines. But anyway, I started there, and I went to work for a small cable TV station who decided, and that was back when, I know I'm so old, but back when they only had 13 channels on your TV, and you click
I remember
things.
that.
Yeah, and so they decided they were going to get out of originations because they were going to add HBO, and so I was going to be out of a job. And I had produced a couple corporate videos, and one of the people I produced a corporate video show said, "Does other people need this work? Where can we go to get this done?" When they heard the studio was closing, and he said, "Well, if you put together a business plan, I'll help put you in business." And I wrote a terrible business plan. This is before the internet. There was very limited research on how to write business plans. I know it was a terrible plan, but I know what after I got to know the guys later, I know what they saw, and they said, "Oh, we might not make any money with this guy, but we're not going to lose a lot of money with this guy." And that was the kind of the case. So we went into business, and 47 years later, I'm still at it.
And was that CCI your current business?
It is, yeah.
Okay, and that's Communication Concepts Incorporated.
Yep, correct. CCI. Yep.
So CCI is in a studio right on the main drag, right there you're still in Cape Canaveral, not quite in Cocoa Beach, right?
No, yeah, I'm in Cape Canaveral. I'm in the city that's just south of the port, just south of the Space Center. Yep.
Yeah, so for those of you that don't know the area, this is an area that is, this is where space happens. This is the one town where everything almost, it seems, is related to the space industry. If you go a little bit further, maybe you get into the surfing in Cocoa Beach and all that, but for Cape Canaveral, man, space is it, right?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a force multiplier, because you have the main space companies, and then they have so many subsidiary companies or support companies. So yeah, it definitely drives. Tourism is a big thing here in the Space Coast, as you well know, but space is huge. If you look at some of the big employers now, Blue Origin, who has built, and since you were here, a gigantic facility right next to the visitor center. And every time I go out there to next to their complex, well, they build the New Glenn rocket actually there. And then across the street from them is the OneWeb facility that's owned by Airbus, where they build the OneWeb satellites. And then, of course, in the Melbourne area, we have a lot of aerospace as well. You've got Northrop Grumman, who designed and builds part of the B-2 bomber there. And you have Embraer that makes 3 or 4 different types of corporate jets in Melbourne. So, and then you have, of course, the big dog, L3 Harris, which employs like 14,000 people. So.
And it's interesting to drive around the back roads in that area, because it's not odd to see like some sort of a giant rocket engine on a semi-truck being moved from one warehouse or facility to another. So you see all these strange things. It's almost like, what was that, a UFO that they're moving from place to place? I always loved seeing that kind of stuff.
Well, of course, the port is very big on that because, of course, SpaceX brings their rockets back on a barge often when they don't land them at the Space Center. And so it's not unusual to be sitting having lunch and watch a rocket just coming back from space being delivered there. And, of course, a lot of the hardware gets delivered by ocean-going barges into the port, unloaded there, and then moved into the Space Center. So you definitely see space hardware around town all the time.
Well, let's get back to your business, CCI,
Yeah.
for a minute. You sort of at one point were almost kind of exclusively doing NASA stuff, and you have that studio that's right there on the
Yeah.
main drag. Um,
Yeah.
it's a nice big building with a nice TV studio inside, and you used to do live shows for NASA, right? Tell me
Correct.
about sort of the peak of the NASA work that you did.
Well, first of all, the peak of the work was actually for commercial rocket launch companies in the old school commercial rocket launches. Back when the shuttle disaster happened, President Reagan signed a
The first shuttle
commercialization.
disaster.
Yeah, the commercialization of Space Act. And basically, simply, the Space Act said that commercial companies could use government facilities to launch rockets. At that time, America did not have any commercial space. And so a person at NASA, Eddie Harrison, said to me, he says, we're going to have to provide them our launch pads or room for their launch pads, but we're not going to have to provide them communication services. And he said, so I think you should approach them, because I was already doing some contract work for NASA. And so I approached each of the key players that were going to launch commercial rockets. That would be, at that time, McDonnell Douglas with a Delta rocket, General Dynamics with the Atlas rocket, and Martin Marietta with the Titan rocket. And they were depressing sales calls, Steve. I had the right people around the table, but I had all these blank looks as I had explained to them that they're going to need commercial services of communication services, video production and such. And I went away and I thought I had wasted a lot of money, because those places, Denver, San Diego, Huntington Beach, and I was a small company at the time. And so I'm spending money flying around. Anyway,
Yeah.
but 6 months before the first commercial launch, which was a Delta launch, McDonnell Douglas, a British Space Broadcasting, a BSB satellite, I get this call and says, hey, were you out here talking to us about communication services, video production? We need help. And
Well,
from
thanks
there,
for remembering me.
yeah. And they sort of remembered me. People change.
Yeah.
That was two years before. Anyway, so at one time we were doing all the commercial rocket launches and some of the NASA launches, and that kind of peaked at about the time of the space shuttle ending. And when the space shuttle ended, NASA had a dedicated contractor that had really nothing to do. And so NASA said they could use their equipment to cover commercial launches. And so, and that combined with, we were doing the launch coverage for Lockheed Martin owned the rights to the Proton rocket in Kazakhstan and the Atlas rocket in Cape Canaveral. And so we were doing the launches in Kazakhstan too. And all of a sudden they decided to sell the Proton off. They merged the Atlas with Boeing into United Launch Alliance, and a lot of our work just changed. So that would have been the peak. We did have a contract direct running the NASA press site for about a year since then, but right now our main focus is still aerospace day to day, and our biggest client is a company called Safran. Safran's a French company, but they have 14,000 employees in North America, and they are the largest. They make everything but the airplane. They make the engines, the landing gear, the interiors, everything. They just don't make airplanes, and so we do quite a bit of work for them. So they're a good client.
Well, good. Good. I'm glad you're still at it, because
Yeah.
the space landscape has changed completely. It's kind of like, so our podcast obviously is about the media landscape, but people don't realize that Cape Canaveral as a town has changed dramatically since, they closed up the shuttle program, because
Right.
it's basically all commercial. So you've seen it go from commercial, just started and was in its infancy, and now commercial has basically eclipsed the whole thing, and it's all commercial.
That's, I won't say it's not 100% commercial, but it's, you've got the SLS rocket that still hasn't been killed. And so they're going to do another launch within a year, but they launch that rocket once every 2 years, every 3 years. And so you can't say it's dominating the range. There are a few government bought launches that are quasi commercial, quasi whatever. But for the most part, it's SpaceX really, right now, launching sometimes 2 times a day, and definitely launching a couple times a week, every week. I mean, they did over 100 launches last year. And so, I won't say launches have lost a little their intrigue to the public, but if you're here, if you're locals, I'm not sure you run outside in your backyard to watch a launch anymore, because there's just so many of them. Because you couple that with a few government launches, and United Launch Alliance has the new Vulcan rocket, and they still have the Atlas rocket. And so they launch maybe 3 to 4 times a year, 5 times a year here. And so, if you come to Florida and you're in the Space Coast for a week, you have a huge, used to be, I said I could let you get in to see a launch, but I don't guarantee you'll see a launch. Now it's almost, if you're here, you're going to see a launch. There's just no doubt about it.
I was last time I was there, I didn't plan it at all. I'm in New Smyrna Beach with a buddy of mine, Gary Singer, who was a news photographer that I worked with for years. I went to see him. And we walked down on the beach, and he said, he looked at his watch. He said, yeah, we've got a launch coming up in about 3 minutes. Let's turn around. And I said, what, a launch right now? Sure enough, we turn around, and here we watch this launch. And I didn't even know it was happening. I mean, so to your point there, it used to be a big deal. Everyone would gather for the launches, and they'd know like weeks in advance, and local media like me would come and cover it. And now it's a regular thing. But I guess that's what to be expected if we're going to move into space more and have more satellites and all of this kind of thing.
I think people definitely liken it to the development of the airplane. I mean, that's the analogy that you see all the time. And, people don't run to the airport for the most part to watch planes take off and land anymore. And the same thing will eventually happen with the rocket industry, too.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's move into the other industry that has changed. I know that you haven't worked in you didn't work in traditional newsrooms at any point. Am I correct?
I tried to. I would have had this company if a guy who you worked for hired me. But basically, I was originally going to follow a journalism path getting out of college. I mean, it came out of School of Journalism. And I had applied at WFTV Channel 9. And a news director named Jim Lewis, just by coincidence, not related to me, offered me a job as a reporter for Brevard County. But he left. He left, I think, on good terms at Channel 9. And Bob Jordan came in. And I was supposed to start work there on a Monday. And on a Sunday, I got a call from Bob Jordan. I've looked at your tape and don't bother coming in. And that was the end of my journey.
Just like that?
Just like that, yeah.
But that is absolutely Bob Jordan. He just doesn't mess around. He doesn't waste your time. I'm sorry that happened to you. But Jim, I mean,
it worked out good.
Have your own company. And I mean, you did do journalism. I mean, your journalism was the space program.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
You ended up doing it anyway and being able to stay in Brevard County. And I bet you made a lot more money than the Brevard County reporter does.
Yeah, I probably did. First of all, it was a blessing. You don't realize it at the time. Obviously, I was kind of a little down. You're waiting. You've already quit your other job, and you're thinking you're going to come in. And but in reality, it really everything's a learning experience, and it definitely set me in the right direction eventually. So it's good.
Yeah. So our podcast, mostly, I mean, we can touch on anything because our subject matter is the media. And if the media is covering something, or if it's online, or if it's on social media, we can riff on, we can talk about it. But you reached out to me because one of your big things that you notice is, I guess you'd call it the rhetoric that surrounds just about everything in the news business right now. And that's something that bothers you. It's inflammatory language, I think, is something that your email said. Yeah. And you sent me a little article that you wrote too.
Yeah, I wrote the editorial. I felt pretty, I kept saying, I need to do something about this. And I'll just kind of say, I saw the headline on, and I'm not going to quote any sources, but lots of sources saying, so-and-so went scorched earth on somebody else. And it was a repeated headline. And the one I have to say, knowing this interview was coming out, I looked today, and now the phrase is, so-and-so embarrassed him or herself. Embarrassed with something they said or something they did or some error. And first of all, I'm of the belief, and that's probably an old school belief, that journalism is supposed to be impartial. It's supposed to, the word report doesn't mean you give me your opinion with it. And so many of these headlines, I think, are divisive for our country. You know, the country's, as I think it's pretty obvious. I mean, it's fairly divided right now. I mean, you have some diehards on either side, but I think we need to do things not to divide the country. Now, maybe that gets you a lot more clicks on your story, and I know that's an important part, but um, I would, if you want to use the words, as I wrote in the editorial, if you want to use the word scorched earth to describe a fire in California, that's good with me, but I just don't think people go scorched earth on one another. I mean, and is it, is that low-hanging fruit for a news guy? Taking what somebody said and making that into a news story? Is that kind of like, chasing the ambulance or something? I don't know, but it just doesn't seem like news to me.
Well, I think you make a great point with in terms of language, because you take a word like embarrassed. Well, I could do anything and not be embarrassed by it. Like I
Right.
could do something that you would think is very embarrassing, but I inside my brain might not be embarrassed by it. So that is such an opinion-based word that
That's right.
it really doesn't have any place in journalism. Unless you're saying that this expert says that this is an embarrassing moment for this person or something like that. So when you insert that into a news story, you're essentially turning that news story into an opinion piece,
I
you
believe
know,
that.
or
Yep.
scorched earth. You're using some word that really describes a real thing, like a volcano just like destroyed a town. That is
Yep.
scorched earth.
Yep.
Scorched earth isn't when you get in an argument with someone on The View or, on Fox News or CNN or wherever it is. That's not scorched earth.
Yeah, and I see it. I have to say, and I don't know what the public is, but I think I get most of my news from the internet, and I have a couple of feeds. I'll even quote what feeds I get. I get one from MSN, and I get another feed from Google. And I know they put stories together, or the stories I read, based on probably what I've looked at and what I've done. I mean, I'm sure I don't get the same feed you get if you went to those sources, but these reoccurring headlines, and again, I went and looked today, and the word embarrassed, so and so embarrassed about this, or they embarrassed that, and then last week when I actually put the touches to that editorial, it was scorched earth, and there was just so many of them. And I'm wondering also too if this is an influence of AI writing some of the stories where they have phrases they use a lot, but again, and I know you want us to click on that story. The media definitely wants you, because they don't get the ad dollar until you click on it.
Right.
And but going way back to early school, I mean, I remember the New York Times, kind of changed the model for news from the standpoint it used to be paper boys in the street doing the same thing, screaming out headlines that may or may not be in the newspaper to get the newspaper sold. And New York Times stopped that and came up with the idea that it's all the news that's fit to print, and a trusted source. And I think they kind of even set the rules and regulations, no, the guidelines for television news, was based on that. And I have to say, it really is somehow degraded back to the guy in the street yelling out headlines that may or may not have anything to do with the story. That's
Yeah, it's
sad.
like now it's just a big bold print,
Yeah.
that comes at you, at every turn. Where I'm curious, you've been around the TV business for a very, very long time. Where do you see it? Like, where do you see it going from here? Because obviously the local newsroom, your ABC affiliate, your CBS affiliate, the newsrooms that you had in your local community are sort of dying on the vine here and dying this slow death, losing all their viewers, losing all their advertising dollars. Then they end up losing all of their staff and all of their equipment. But where do you kind of see it going from here? Do you think it's just going to be social media based, or will there be a community, like an Orlando Sentinel, that morphs itself into something more digital that actually succeeds?
That's a tough question, Steve. And if I had the answer, I probably could make a lot of money. But first of all, when you mentioned the Orlando Sentinel, and my dad used to work for the Sentinel many years ago. Um, the newspapers knew this was coming way before television knew they were going to lose the local newsroom was going to lose thing. I mean, they had years. They kept saying, it's going to be digital. We're going to go away. And I don't think any of them found the secret or figured out how to avoid that. I think they're still trying. I mean, I look at Tribune Media, and they have lots of stuff. You look at what the Washington Post did when Jeff Bezos bought them, and obviously they generate stories that they resell to people, or you take their ads and they come up with a revenue model with it. And I think both those models are sort of working as far as revenue. I think it's a pretty sad situation, and I really don't know a solution. I see, just as you mentioned, the local newsrooms losing budgets for equipment, losing budgets for people. A reporter that we had here in Brevard County that used to be with WESH said something to me, and I was saying, and this was before I really realized what was going on with TV news and the way you just spoke about it. And he said, less reporters make for less good news. And I said, oh, you mean you don't have anybody to copy? And he says, no. He says, when you have more people digging, you get more stories, and more stories lead to better news coverage. And I really know he's right. The fact that we don't have legitimate news, but I think you've moved into what is maybe the future. That seems like a lot of people, when I saw a study recently, get their news from podcasts or their information. Yeah. Maybe it's not news exactly, but podcasts have really replaced a lot of the TV news. I have a friend who thinks we should be buying up podcasts and forming our own podcast, own the podcast as well as the network they're on. But I see you're on a lot of different networks. How's that working?
It's working great for me, and it's really an outlet for me as a journalist, because for 35 years I did it within the confines of the newsroom, a newsroom right. that was owned by or that was within a television station, which also had, obviously Channel 9, ABC affiliates. So we had all the ABC stations or all the ABC entertainment stuff, and we had the news. So you existed within this large company, and then within ABC, then you're owned, the station itself's owned by Cox Media Group. And so you've got this big umbrella, right? That you can go in, you get your health care, you get your paycheck, they buy your truck, they buy your camera, they give you the airtime, and you've got guys upstairs that are selling the advertising. And now with a podcast, you have to do all that yourself. So you have to come up with what kind of a mic you're going to use, what kind of a camera you're going to use, how are you going to do it. So you have to kind of figure it out yourself. So it's very fun from that perspective, but also you have no idea, because I give my product to Spotify, or I give my product to Apple, and I just give it to them. They don't buy it from me. Like if you are selling if you're a production company and you're selling Seinfeld to someone, right? They buy Seinfeld, and then they sell the advertising for you, and they generate enough revenue to pay you for buying Seinfeld from you, right? That doesn't right. exist in the podcast world, because right now, and maybe this will change, but right now you basically give it to them, and then they say, you go figure out how to make money on it, because right. they're not going to help you. But you're providing free content to these huge corporations, and you're doing all the work and providing all the equipment and doing everything that needs to be done and coming up with the content. I don't have a producer to come up with my content anymore. So it's a very different world. So I've got to figure out how to navigate that world. But for me, that is the podcast, is figuring out, how do you do this now? How is journalism going to work from this point on going forward? And how is it going to work? I also like to explore, how is it going to work from the perspective of, like, we have the right and the left right now, and the middle is kind of ignored. So how do we get back to that point where we are journalists that say to ourselves, I don't care about my opinion, and I'm going to try really hard to keep my opinion out of it. Now, I got to admit, I'm not doing that right now. I feel free to express my opinion, because I don't feel like anymore I'm a journalist. Now I'm just an entertainment guy. Like, we're trying to make fun and things like that. But this is why I like to interview guys like you who have some perspective on where we were, where we are, and then where we're going. So I do think that the podcast space, one of the podcasts that I watch is a woman, her name's Tara Palmieri. And if you go on her channel, she immediately says, hey, I used to work at ABC News. So she was, I think, the White House correspondent. Wow. Or the congressional I think it was the White House correspondent for ABC News for years. And she points out, like in one of her very first interviews that she has pinned right to the top of her page, that I no longer have anyone telling me editorially what to say. I get to say whatever I want. So I don't get the push. Okay, let's say if you're ABC News, right, you would assume that management structure is pushing you off to the left, right? Politically speaking. So she says, in this video, that I don't have that anymore. I can go right down the middle. I can go off to the right if I want on a subject. I can go off to the left if I want. Because it's not this linear thing. Like, we don't exist where there's a line between us and every issue you have to be on this side, okay? No, that's not the way people do it. On one issue, you might be over here. Another issue, you're over here, right? Another issue, you're over here. Another issue, you're right down the middle. Some things you're more passionate about, some things you're not as passionate about. But I don't think that the traditional media landscape allowed for that kind of divergence in journalism. You either had to pick a side, it suddenly became this, you have to pick a side and stay on that side on every single issue right down the line, or you have to stay on this side right down the line.
Well, I think especially if you talk about the cable news networks, they definitely preach to their choir. They found that's the best revenue model. So if you're right wing or left wing, there's no money in being in the middle. It is my impression. On the cable news networks, it's like you just preach to your same choir every day. You own that group, and that's how you make money. That's a sad situation, but it definitely seems like what happens. I mean, I'll pick on Fox, but Fox definitely has a very narrow editorial thought process of where they go. And CNN, they've kind of changed because they've had some economic issues, but they kind of know what their target audience is. MSNBC definitely does,
Right.
So they preach to that.
You could put Fox on one side and MSNBC on the other, and then CNN tries to come right up the middle a little bit. And
maybe.
I have seen signs that CNN is really starting to realize, wait a second, we're too far off to the left, and maybe we need to try and make ourselves the middle ground. I'm not sure how successful they're being at that, and then the other networks, there's other sub networks popping up, your Newsmaxes and your Young Turks,
right?
On either side, but it does still seem like it's divergent.
Right. And I just think we all need to work together somehow. And I don't know what the revenue model is for it. But again, I started on this whole thing when I contacted you about divisive headlines. And I just think the news media, because of what it's doing with that, is helping divide the country. And I think that's all. I don't know. I think it'd be too strong a word, but it's almost a type of terrorism. I mean, you're provoking people. You're
using fear of someone else.
Yeah. Exactly. And I also think it might be the easy story too. And that's where I almost wonder if AI is involved in it. Like, you dissect somebody's speech and you just say they went scorched earth and here's what they said. And, I don't know, but I hope that's not the case.
You're listening to Barrett and Baxa, Media Schmedia. Real stories, raw takes, and the slow, strange death of traditional media.
You just brought up something that I'm always interested in, and that's artificial intelligence. In your world, what you're doing, how much in your video production are you using AI? I already use it. So I use like Opus Clip, for example. I can give Opus Clip my podcast, and Opus Clip will pick out like, oh, this 5-minute piece is about this particular subject, and I'm going to subclip it and edit it into another video. And so without going in and touching any buttons, I suddenly have that part where I'm talking about, squirrels running up trees for their nuts, is its own little piece. And I can't believe it, because it's like a little chapter of my podcast that I didn't have to create. Whereas in the old world, I would have to go in, find the time code, edit that out, take that piece and subclip it into another piece of video. Are you using a lot of AI tools in your stuff these days, or
well, first of all, we're probably not using AI as much as some people. I mean, and there are some production companies now that are 100% AI. They don't do any real production. They don't shoot anything. They just generate images for a client, and they do a lot of social media and stuff. But here's some things we use it for. Obviously, I'm not it's completely AI, but we definitely get automated transcripts now, and it supposedly comes under the AI heading. I don't know, but having a transcript when you're editing something definitely makes it easier, quicker, and whatever. So that's one. And you can in the Adobe Premiere is what we use for most of our edits, and you can edit by your transcript. You don't even have to look at the video. You can just say, "Oh, put this with this, do this, and this," and it also has an AI generated scene extend, which I know in editing. Is just very useful. Sometimes, the shooter, the camera operator didn't shoot you enough of a particular scene, so you can't transition into the next scene. Well, you can generate now with AI, we can generate, up to 7 seconds of additional footage to help with that, which is quite helpful. In the still area, it is just amazing. We don't do it too often, but you can de-age people. Which is, I think if you're in the fashion world, the handles they give you for what you can do to a picture without actually working on the picture, you're just working with words is quite amazing. We use AI to up-res. Right now I'm doing a documentary about Martin Caidin. Martin Caidin, the sci-fi author that wrote Cyborg, which became the $6 Million Man. And obviously a lot of the footage we have we've acquired is old standard definition footage, and AI offers its amazing up-res capabilities. It actually analyzes the picture and figures what pixels to regenerate to make the picture 4K. Now it's very computer intensive, and they probably are selling a service to get you to go off to a server, a cloud server, so they can sell you more services. But if you we have I think the latest technology and graphics cards and a lot of RAM and the types of things you need to make your computer run fast. And still, up-resing 10 seconds of video could take 10 minutes, and up-resing, more takes longer. And if you're really doing a really good job on it, you may take several hours to do 10 seconds of video on the computer. I'm sure that will come down, but what it does is really amazing. I mean, and it restores old footage. You can also, we have done this occasionally. You can take old still photos and animate a few seconds of them where they come to life.
I've done that with even my kids. Like I have this great picture of my dad and my son when my son was a little baby, and I plugged it into an AI software, and it brought it to life. Just like we have the live picture that you can take on your iPhone and you hit the live button, it brings it to life. And I was like that. It didn't give my dad an extra finger or do any of those weird things. It really made it look like that was a live picture. Jim, you talked about transcripts, and that's one of the earliest things that I found out that you could do. And it just so happened I had to have surgery on both of my hands, which meant I didn't type. So back in the day, to log a script, you remember, you had to type it. You had to type what they said as you listened to it. And so I got very good and very fast at typing, and I could type as fast as anyone could talk, right? So, But when I had my hand surgeries, I couldn't type at all. So Dave Cyrak, who Dave.
I know Dave.
Dave Cyrak was our operations manager, and he said, here's what you do, Steve, so that you can log your interviews. Because if you do a 10-minute interview, you have to sit down and type out a 10-minute interview, right?
Yeah, that's long. That's a lot of typing.
He said, here's what you do. Upload it to YouTube, and then YouTube will create a transcript, and then you can cut and paste the transcript and use that as your log. So instead of sitting there having to type the whole thing out, I just would upload, and I guess I didn't even realize it was AI doing it at the time, but it was a free service. And so all I do is upload it to YouTube every day. And in 10 minutes, I'd have it logged quicker than I could log a 20-minute interview. It would give me a transcript with time codes and everything. And I loved it. And that was my first experience using any kind of AI. That's probably 5 years ago. That was just before COVID. So that would have been 6 years ago or so.
The having it integrated into the edit suite makes it just so much more efficient, because we used to do that too. We use both Vimeo because if we need a transcript for something, we would do that. But then you have to go and take that, and it's not locked in with your video. So as
Now
far
it's
as your
locked in.
edit, now it's locked in. It's all tied in there. And of course,
So
I use AI to help write scripts. I mean, I don't let them write the script, but I run stuff by it. I find AI does use similar phrases over and over again and things like that. But it definitely helps you get going, and it helps you. I'm a person who leaves out small words. It's like the ultimate spelling checker. When you say, tweak this up, make it more compelling, do that type of things, and
and it's
definitely
amazing
useful.
because so for example, this system that we're using right now, it's called Riverside.fm. So in the time, so we're going on about 35 minutes we've been talking so far. And when I close this, it will give me a transcript of that 35 minutes. Within about 2 minutes, 3 minutes, I'll have a transcript of everything we said. And if we're talking over each other, it will know. Like, it can separate your voice from my voice. Excuse my voice a little bit. I got a frog in my throat here, but I think it's just amazing the way AI can help you with these things. And I was talking to somebody the other day who works at one of the big podcast companies. I won't say which because she's a good friend, but she said that if anyone in the video space needs to be using AI and learning all the things that AI can do, otherwise this is sort of the point in time where you'll be left behind if you're not willing to explore that stuff and you're still sort of hard-headed and wanting to do it all the old-fashioned way. It's like trying to do tape-to-tape still, tape-to-tape editing instead of using nonlinear editing. Why would you do it? You need to just dust off the past and move on.
The thing about all these advances is we don't seem to wind up with any more time, though. You just wind up doing more stuff. I mean, we used to edit tape a long time ago, tape to tape, and then multi-machine tape, and then we went to nonlinear. But I have to say, you stay just as busy. I don't know where all the time goes, but it definitely gives you a lot more capabilities. Last thing for AI, and there's so many of these things, but in Adobe, they have a section for sound enhancement. And literally, you can take a soundtrack and change the room it's in, change the way it sounds, the way it feels. And there's an adjustment, but then there's where it takes the voice and it regenerates it through AI. And it's a little bit scary. Like if, there's this quote, podcast voice, which is, got a lot of presence and such. And I can have somebody I've recorded on the street and I put it in there and you say, I want it in a podcast voice. And it's unbelievable. Now, every once in a while it does make mistakes, but it's definitely a powerful tool.
Well, I've experienced that already. And this is one of the things I do on the podcast is when I make mistakes or discover something that doesn't work, I put it right out there and I say, here's what we did. Because to me, other journalists, I hope, are watching and going, oh, well, okay, what software are they using or how are they doing this? So I applied an AI filter to both of our voices. It was Bob and I, my other co-host, and I applied the same AI filter to both of us. And I came out, my audio was perfect, and I was trying to fix his audio. And because of the adjustment that this filter that I put on it, it made me sound like I was in a tin can. And I went back and said, wait a second, that's not how it was supposed to do. And I kind of trusted it, and I put it out there, and then I had to pull the episode down and put the episode back up because the audio, like, it tweaked it in a way that I didn't want it to.
Yeah, we did a shoot at a convention center where we did a bunch of interviews, and you pick up background sound, and it was interesting. Most of the time the AI would fix it, but every once in a while it would latch in on somebody in the background talking, and all of a sudden that became a dominant voice in it. And so you have to definitely, just like with the AI generated text or anything else, you have to definitely check the work because it's not
a perfect science yet.
It's not a person.
Yeah.
But I'm so happy you're on a podcast. I want to tell you that. I thought about you retired, and I thought you're too young to retire, and you have too much to do, and I know the grind is something else. But I think I'm really glad to see you're doing this, and I hope it's super successful for you, because
Thanks,
I
Jim.
really do think you're a quality guy, and you should chase hurricanes occasionally for fun. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
well, that's one of the things that I miss is the hurricane chasing. The storm chasing is one of the most exciting parts of the career. But one thing that I don't miss is the daily deadlines. That is really what was getting me, because 5 o'clock is 5 o'clock. It's not
Yep.
5:01 or 5:02. It's right there. It's so precise. And to have those deadlines every single day of your life, you've got your noon, then your 4 o'clock, then your 5 o'clock. And man, I didn't realize until I got out of it how much my life was controlled and how much my brain was like focused on, what's my next deadline? I mean, I would worry. I still have dreams to this day that I am missing a live shot and I'm supposed to be on live television.
Is that a dream, or is that
it's the only nightmare that I have?
Yeah. I was going to say, I thought that might be a nightmare. Though, I have to say there's parts of that regimen in television, whether it's news or whatever, it is all that. I mean, you're down to fractions of seconds in decisions all the time, whether it's live or whether it's editing or whether it's news deadlines. And part of that discipline is I like. I really, and I'll tell you what I don't like it. When a contractor who's working on your house tells you it's going to be done next week, I don't think they've given any thought to how long it will take, what supplies they need, or whatever. But if I tell you something's going to be delivered at a certain time in video, it's going to be there. We're going to hit satellite. We're going to do whatever. And
Right.
So I don't know. I understand being in. I was never really in the grind quite the way you were. But there are parts of it I do appreciate.
Yeah. You talk about satellite windows. I mean, and that's kind of old. I mean, it's still people in television do use satellite because sometimes it's the only way to get it done. But people don't realize you get a 5-minute window, and it's a very expensive window. So it may not be a live broadcast, but if you're supposed to feed some tape, if you're supposed to feed video in that 5-minute window, you better not miss it, or it costs the company a lot of money.
Yeah.
Because then they have to find another satellite and another window to book. And, people, there's so much that goes into it. It's just amazing. But
yeah, exactly.
Well, Jim, I always say this after I interview someone. Is there anything that you're interested in the media landscape that we didn't discuss or that you wanted to say, that you wanted to get in there?
Well, no, I think we hit the main topic that I wanted to get in there, but I will say a couple of things. I don't know if the public knows, but you were in a movie that I produced.
I was.
And I'm so happy you did that. I think you were the perfect person for the movie, and the movie's done okay. It didn't do great, but I'm proud of it, and I'm proud of you in that, and I loved every minute of it. So.
No, that was a fun time. We spent a week at your studio there in Cape Canaveral, shooting right in the studio. You built a jail, the interior of a jail inside. And then, of course, we had shot the pilot. We had shot the half-hour segments years earlier and then brought them together in the whole movie script. So that was pretty amazing. That was a great experience. So anybody who wants to check that out, Confessions of a Producer. It's still out there, really, on all the platforms.
Yeah, it is. It's still there. Yeah. So anyway, it was a lot of fun. And again, I'm really glad to see the podcast. And I've some of these podcasts have just got huge. So I'm hoping yours will get huge. I think you guys are talented people.
It's a labor of love at this point, Jim.
Yeah, I understand that. I've been in some of those.
All right. Well, Jim Lewis, I really appreciate you joining us.
Well, that's it for this episode of Barrett and Baxa Media Schmedia. Like, subscribe, and do all that other stuff podcasts want you to do. Become one of the chosen few, the in crowd. You know, the cool kids. The ones who are passed out on Barrett's pool deck long after the party ended.
You don't say I love you like you